program, as you all know. I've been at KGI for 4 years. I started the program here. I am originally from Los Angeles. I'm born and raised here, but I've lived in a lot of other places. And I went to Mount Sinai School of Medicine for my genetic counseling degree 12, 13 years ago. And I stayed in New York, and that's really where I practiced genetic counseling in a clinical setting, largely, predominantly clinical and predominantly reproductive. So I became, I've always been interested in reproductive medicine. Even though, interestingly enough, undergrad, I had a very, very, very non-traditional route to genetic counseling. I was not an undergrad. I was not a science undergrad at all. I was actually cultural anthropology and sociology. And I ended up doing some post-bac work prior to starting at Mount Sinai for other kinds of various reasons brought me back to school. But yeah, I was predominantly at Columbia University. I'm doing fetology and high-risk fetal intervention. I was the assistant program director for the LIU genetic counseling program prior to moving back to Southern California after having my first child, and then I had a subsequent second child, which is the program, and then the third real child. So, so I have two very young children at home, and the program itself is another baby of mine and ours. And we graduated our first cohort in 2020. So we're still a very, very new program. And we just finished our application cycle for our fourth cohort, so the class of 2023. So I'm going to give you just like a little bit of information about our program and about genetic counseling, but it sounds like you all pretty much have a good-ish understanding of what it is. All right, so I'm just going to share, and then I truly want to, I might kind of zip through my slides just to be able to answer any questions that you have, because I think that those are actually the most important and most informative, end up being the most informative for all of you, okay? So let me share my screen. Sometimes it's good that Courtney has access to my slides, because sometimes my PowerPoint, it like pauses and doesn't let me progress. So, all right, let's see. Okay, so here we go. There we go. Okay, fantastic. So genetic counseling, what do we do? Or what we do and who we are, right? Genetic counseling is a process to evaluate and understand a family's risk of an inherited medical condition. A genetic counselor is a healthcare professional with specialized training in medical genetics and counseling. And genetic counselors do provide risk assessment, education, and support to individuals and families. We provide genetic and genomic expertise, guidance, and I think most importantly, advocacy to patients and the healthcare team. We do interpret genetic test results, but more importantly, the meaning of those results. And we do function within a variety of specialties, such as all that is listed there below. So different areas of practice, and this really is changing, but we do have that quote unquote traditional clinical role, which is often in prenatal or preconception, pediatrics, cancer, and adults. So adult diagnosis, adult genetic disease, okay? Expanding areas of expertise and subspecialization, really some of these three areas are really gaining more traction and have over the last couple of years in adult cardiology, neurology, and psychiatry. Okay, and some of the quote unquote non-clinical roles really have to do with laboratory, business, marketing, product development, genetic counselors who act as medical science liaisons for different companies, variant interpretation, as well as clinical research. So as far as our program, this is our overview, and you can find this on our website as well, but our program does emphasize interprofessional collaboration, problem solving, and personalized patient care. Our program is dedicated to benefiting society through education, training, and the development of innovative, culturally engaged, articulate, and caring genetic counselors who will serve the needs of individual patients, the healthcare system, and the bioscience industry, because they're all so intimately connected. So our curriculum, we pack it in, we pack it in hard. It's a very intense program, as our students can attest to, but it is a 70.5 credit. It's a 21-month program, and we have 30, just the breakdown is 32.5 credits of rigorous or quote unquote didactic coursework. 26 of those credits are awarded for clinical field work, and then about 12 of those credits are for the Capstone Project. And just a rough overview, our first year is very course heavy, and the second year almost entirely focuses on field work and capstone, as well as board preparation. So there are some components of our program. So we have genetic counseling in practice, genetic and genomic principles, genetics in healthcare, professional development, our Capstone Project, and of course, clinical fieldwork. And really all of the components in our program do essentially fit into one of these primary categories. Here is another breakdown of our curriculum. This is the first year of the program. Okay, so as you can see, we have in the fall as well as the spring, we have a year-long foundational genetic counseling course, 1 and 2. I co-teach that with our associate program director, Emily Quinn. And then we have human molecular genetics and genetic disease mechanisms, as well as human genomics, principles of public health, human embryology, and prenatal diagnosis. So the way that these are categorized, I'm actually just going to go back, is that we have, genetic counseling 1 and 2, for example, have to do with genetic counseling in practice. Genetic and genomic principles really have to do with human molecular genetics and human genomics, right? Genetics and healthcare. So we do essentially categorize everything into these into the pathway. So, but as I don't need to go through all of this in such detail with you, but I will point out that, and perhaps this has changed since I last checked, but we are a program that does focus on the omics, right? Genomics. And we are, I'm not 100% certain, but a couple of months ago, I was able to say that we are the only program that offers a standalone human genomics course, as well as really a standalone pharmacogenomics course and precision medicine course. Okay, so those are 2 classes that really do uniquely set our program apart from many others. Okay. Some of the fieldwork observation does start in the first year just to get our students with, getting their feet wet out in the field, but also part of this, what we do in the program as part of the genetic counseling fieldwork, or the quote unquote, the observation, are actually opportunities for our students to work with standardized patients. So there are many, many standardized patient encounters during the first year of the program. Then in the summer between year 1 and year 2, students are out in the field. And that is really the only responsibility for students during the entire summer. And that the expectation is 6 to 8 weeks full time. Okay. And then in the second year, though I had said in the beginning that most of our second year truly is dedicated to the capstone as well as field work, there are other classes going on, but they are, as you can see here, for minimal credit. So 1 credit for psychosocial development for a whole year-long series, as well as professional development. And then we do, even though it's 0 credits, our students are very heavily involved in a board review course, as well as case conference, okay? And the way that that looks in the schedule, for those of you that are a bit more visually oriented, is if you can envision, a full day of class, let's say psychosocial development in the morning, case conference in the afternoon, and then professional development in the later on in the afternoon on one full day, like a Monday, every 3 weeks. So it is, again, just very minimal work in that capacity in terms of didactic, the didactic part of the program. Okay. All right. So, right, we have the summer rotation, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 additional rotations, as you can see here, which makes a total of 5 clinical rotations for the entire second year of the program. Okay. All right. We do have really amazing dynamic training opportunities. We partner with nearly every institution here in Southern California, but we are starting to expand and have expanded to other opportunities in other areas. And so we have some sites in the Central Valley, including Sacramento and Fresno. And we are developing affiliation agreements with sites in like Hawaii and New Mexico and Nevada, in a lot of areas where there aren't genetic counseling programs, but also in areas where there are also largely underserved communities. Okay, so here are just some of our sites, and this map here is just for Southern California. So as you can see here, I mean, we really cover a lot. We go as far north as Santa Barbara, and we do go as far south as San Diego. We have some really, really, really incredible sites that we partner with here in Southern California. And again, we are reaching outside of Southern California as well. Okay, so the Capstone Project, we do get a lot of questions about the capstone usually. So originally in the program, we had a traditional thesis, but we did change it to a capstone project. It is still, though, a 2-year project, and it's student-led. The timeline is that in year 1, students are working on their literature review, developing their capstone committee, their methodology, as well. By the end of the first year, students are submitting to the IRB. In year 2, which happens, year 2 technically is starting this summer, is when collecting and analyzing data, and then of course writing up the results. That's really the focus of the second year. But the end goal is within KGI, so just as far as the program, we do require a manuscript as well as a poster at our annual genetics research symposium. And nationally, we do encourage all students to submit their abstracts to a national conference, and or a peer-reviewed journal is also encouraged. Okay, so some of our topics include cultural engagement, access to care, pharmacogenomics, genetic counseling professional issues, decision-making, and direct-to-consumer experience. But I do need to update this list because some of our students right now are just working on such interesting projects. So who should apply to our program in particular is, but really also any genetic counseling program, is someone who wants to combine a passion for science with direct patient care. Someone who wants to be at the center of personalized genomic medicine. Interface with testing laboratories in the biotech industry. This is just a part of the work that we do. And someone who wants to engage in a field that is rapidly evolving, and those who are lifelong learners. So what makes our program different? Some of those courses that I had mentioned, absolutely, but the Claremont Consortium. So for those of you that don't know, KGI is a part of the Claremont Consortium. There are 7 schools that are a part of that, 5 of which are undergraduate schools. And it just really comes with such a plentiful and insane amount of resources. Our location and the clinical opportunities is such a perk. We have unique course offerings in a flipped approach. So maybe some of you are familiar with that, maybe some of you aren't, but a flipped approach is when for a class and multiple classes, let's say a video is required to watch ahead of time, or reading or quizzes essentially are required ahead of time, and then in class time together is actually spent doing active learning. So activities, discussions, things like that, right? So all, instead of that traditional model of, all right, I'm going to do the lecture during class and then you have work to do afterward. Ours is literally flipped. So students are coming having read or prepared for the material and really ready to engage in it. We have a close relationship with the Master of Science in Human Genetics and Genomic Data Analytics program. That's essentially our sister program. And we have nearly entirely, maybe about 90% is genetic counseling faculty and specialized faculty. We do have diversity and cultural engagement scholarships, and anyone specifically for our program, we still are a new program. So we have realized that those that do end up attending our institute really have that goal of making their mark in a new and developing program. So for those of you, and join us virtually this summer. So we do have a clinical genetics and bioinformatics summer program. I think, Courtney, if you can put in the chat, if you can include the link in the chat. It's a week-long program that is myself. I run the clinical portion of it, and Dr. Barbara Fortini, who is the program director for the Human Genetics and Genomic Data Analytics program. We co-instruct, we co-coordinate this entire week, and it's just a really, really cool week. We do we work on cases, we do variant interpretation, and just if I were interested in genetic counseling, back when, this would absolutely be something I would be interested in doing, and that could also just offer you all more insight into different genetic careers, and also work to fulfill your interest, and also help support your CV, right? They're all very important things. All right, so keep in touch. I will include my information in the chat if anyone wants to get in touch with me. I'm actually going to stop sharing now. The way that I conceptualize my responsibilities as program director is I really think about myself as a program director for 4 kinds of classes. Our students that are interested, right? Our pre-students, our first years, our second years, and then our graduates. So I am available to, thank you, Courtney. I am available to all of you individually as well. I do set some time and answer any questions or provide guidance, especially for the admissions process. It's quite an insane, extensive one. So, but all right, that's just a very quick overview of our program. What kinds of questions do y'all have?
So you had mentioned that some of the projects that the students are working on are really fascinating. You gave a list of some of the topics, but what were the ones that excite you the most?
My goodness. I think I'm so I have been more a part of the clinical portion of our program, and Emily Quinn is the one who predominantly oversees the capstones. And so in about 3 weeks or so, I'm going to see all of our students are going to be presenting their research from this year. But there are a lot of our students are doing work with underserved communities. And so one of our students is, her project is working with she's a native Hawaiian, and she's working with, oh, thank you, Courtney. These are some of our past projects. Okay, so yeah, so those are some of the past projects. So we will be updating this, as soon as they graduate in about a month and a half. So so she's doing one. It really has to do with, a lot of it has to do with access, which I just think is so fascinating and important. One of our students actually now two of them, one of our soon to be graduates and one of our first years, is doing an analysis with clergy and their influence on genetic testing, really an understanding of, but the influence of the uptake of genetic testing or even counseling services. So I just think that that's really, really interesting. I'm very curious to see what happens with that. Another one of our students is working with different programs and different program leadership to try to better, it's one part of it is to understand what programs have done to create more of an inclusive environment, especially in terms of language with respect to the LGBTQ community, and really the use of language, but then to offer suggestions and solutions to all programs on how to potentially tailor curriculum to have inclusive language. So I think that's really interesting. So yeah, I mean, they're all interesting, quite frankly. Individual projects. We did a patient book or a patient Romani disease and distributed that to families and did a, you know, essentially a pre-survey, a post-survey, just about like, is this material helpful? But I think it was cool that they created, you know, a tool and a book, you know. So there really is a lot to be done and a lot of guidance there too. So I hope that answered your question. Catherine says, I'm a psychology major. I have no background in biology or medicine. Neither did I. Neither did I. And yes, it will be a challenge. I'm not going to lie. It will be a challenge, but it's not impossible whatsoever. I think as long as you have your prerequisites, the reason why we have prerequisites and do well in your prerequisites, that I think is probably the most important thing. We do offer a course in genetics, and it's taught by one of our genetics faculty members. And if someone, let's say, matches to our program and they're feeling perhaps that they're just not feeling confident or want something else, then we offer that class to anyone in our program, but we'll offer free of charge, right? And so that's something too that students can, if they want just that added, okay, right before you start, you know, your program, if you want kind of a hardcore genetics class, and that's something that we can also do. Okay. So, but there are a lot of students who did not have a biology or a science undergrad. Again, I was one of them. And grad school is it really truly has a different level of motivation, right? Some of our students have had very poor overall GPAs, but have turned out to be on our dean's list, you know, that when you go into grad school, there's a different level of focus and motivation than there is for undergrad. And that's just true. You know, you're at a different place in your life. It's a training program. It's about your career, right? And when you enter, perhaps some of you, you know, have had some idea when you entered college. I didn't. When I was 18, my gosh, I was just like, yeah, let's just have fun. Let's get through classes, you know? And so anyway, Catherine, I hope I answered your question. All right. make sure that your prerequisites are all sufficient and that you have a good handle, especially your genetics prerequisite, your molecular. Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question about the application process, the national matching system or service. How does that work? I'm very confused.
It is awesome. It's amazing. Ugh, how it used to be such a disaster. So what it is you apply to the programs, right? And then you will either be asked for an interview or not. And if you're asked for an interview, then let's say you interview at one school, then and you liked it and you want to rank them, you know, let's say KGI, then you include that on your rank list, your match, okay? And if you interview at multiple schools, then you as the applicant actually are the one in this whole process who have the power. The programs don't have the power, the applicants have the power. So if you apply to multiple schools, then you put them down in the order that you want to go to that school, because it is legally binding. When you are matched to a program, it is legally binding unless you and that program director release each other from the match, okay? So, but from our end, what happens is that we interview, like this past year, we interviewed 70 people, and we then rank them 1 through however many we end up, including on our rank order, in the order that we want them, or that we use an internal rubric. So we just rank all students. And what happens is that the algorithm just does its really beautiful magic. It's magic. It's such an intelligent algorithm. And it really does try to match student preferences first with programs, okay? So, I mean, the way that it used to be done was it was such a mess. It was such a mess. But ultimately, it really does come down to you as the applicant putting the programs in the order that you want them. And if you include something, then you get matched, let's say, to your 4th choice, then it's legally binding. Okay, Carolina?
Yeah, sorry. You mentioned that you interviewed 70 people. Usually, how many people apply to the program?
It fluctuates every year. So, gosh, I don't even remember how many we had this year, 130, 140 or something. But yeah, so yeah.
Okay, and just one more question as well. Wondering like which parts of an applicant's application really like stand out, or what are some things that you're looking for that would kind of like shed light that an applicant would be a good applicant?
So our admissions process is, I actually really love our admissions process. So what happens is our admissions committee, by the time, let me go back. For every applicant, 3 individuals review where did you go? There you go. 3 individuals review each applicant, okay? I review every single one. Emily Quinn reviews every single one. And then the 3rd member, who's usually a genetic counselor. And when we receive the applications for review, we're not actually really looking at the GPA. We don't take the GRE anymore. It's not a requirement for our program. And that was irrespective of COVID. And we are really only reviewing the personal statement, because the personal statement is the most important factor that can, speaking just from KGI, the personal statement is the most important factor that would get you an interview with our program. Okay. And so all of the other components in terms of GPA, prerequisite GPA, any additional experience, our Office of Admissions we have a rubric for everything. So if someone has a certain number of hours in this, then they might, get a couple of like points here or there, right? But we also don't require advocacy work. We don't require shadowing. We don't, and all of those things help. And all of those things listed on your CV. So all of the opportunities that you've ever been able to be involved in, whether it's like, a meeting like this, put this on your CV, right? Any interviews that you do with genetic counselors, put those things on your CV, right? And so, yeah, so I totally lost track of what I was talking about. It happens every now and then, but did I answer your question, or was I going off like way too tangential? Okay, personal statement, most important thing, have people review it, and us, we have a very different personal prompt than other programs. And so we can always tell when things are kind of copy and pasted from other things, and when I would say for hours, really do a lot of like, requires a lot of reflection. We want to be able to read and finish those 3 pages and say, okay, we have a really good idea of who this person is, and we really want to meet this person. That is the most important, and that this person can describe in writing, especially at the very, very end, what you as a person can uniquely contribute, not just to our program, but to the profession at large. That's what we really, really, really want to see. Okay. All right. What are we looking for in applicants in terms of, so we have had students that have had lower GPAs. And so, but as far as our application goes, anyone who has a class or an overall GPA that is less than 3.0, we do ask that you just write an additional very brief statement describing, circumstances. Okay. Yeah. So, so really what we're looking for is technically anything over a 3.0. But again, we have had plenty of students who have had lower than that for various reasons, and have truly become like some of our Dean's List students. So, okay, I don't know who was first. Maybe Bianca, I think, and then Katrina.
I have a couple of questions. Sorry. I want to know what kind of help is offered for students if they're overloaded with coursework, or since we're going through such sensitive materials, if we like just need to talk about it with someone, like what do you have for the students?
Yeah, so on a bigger picture KGI, we have a really incredible department of student affairs. Their whole purpose is to support students. But as far as the program itself goes, we have multiple layers of mentorship and advising. So every student is assigned a faculty advisor that the faculty advisors are required to check in with students once to twice every single semester, just to check in. I meet with students officially once every semester. We also have peer mentors, and that's a second-year student that is matched with a first-year student. That really, really, really helps, especially with our first-year students. And then we have community GC mentors, so genetic counselors that are either directly involved in the program as supervisors, or those that might just want to be more intimately involved in the program but like can't supervise a student out in the field. We do match students with genetic counseling peer mentors. But honestly, we do find, and this has now been 3 years, that we found that the greatest level of support that our students have is with each other in the cohort. With the second year mentors, and being able to, students know that they can very easily access me and Emily. And we have students that, I mean, I give every student my cell phone number, and And so students really do have access. Okay. Did I answer your question?
Yes, I have another one. I have two
Okay,
more
that's fine.
questions.
Okay.
So if you want to take courses that's not part of the GC program, like you just want a break and maybe just want an art course, is that possible, or would it not work with the kind of coursework that's already set for us?
So the coursework is set. It follows progression. You have a very clearly defined progression policy. You have to, complete and pass this class before you can move on to this, those kinds of things. If you wanted to do anything extracurricular, that is totally and completely up to you. Some of our students work, some of our students, do extra classes and are involved in other things. Wanted to take another class at KGI or through our Claremont Consortium, that would be financially an additional cost, and the student would be responsible for that. Our students haven't yet done that because they have, especially for other classes, because they just have found that they just don't have the time for it. And last question, Sabrina?
Yes, about financial aid. Like, what is kind of offered for your program, and is there any way we potentially supplement or like have another job, I guess?
So some of our students do work. Some of our students do work. They either work internal at KGI as student workers or external to KGI, but usually it's very limited. And I know that as far as financial aid, that most of our students are receive financial aid and are fully supported the entire program with loans.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Katrina, go for it.
Okay, so I actually have questions. How to define a genetic counseling related experience? So like if it has experience with something related to the field, how would you define that?
Yeah, so in a lot of different ways. So some of our, especially this past year, I spoke to a lot of applicants and I was like, just get creative, right? Just like, see if you can join conferences, right? Listen to podcasts, right? Write those things down, and perhaps which podcasts and specific episodes or webinars, like things that you can just get access to. If you can, if you can volunteer, although I know volunteering is getting harder right now. But I say, if you are reading some books, right? If you're watching, go to the MSGC, there are videos there, the Master series. I think they're quite outdated personally, but that's always something. I know that other programs, like what I'm telling you is mostly for our program, what we take. But a lot of our students too, just really, really had, there were a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion kinds of conferences and workshops, right? So really trying to get involved in some of those things, and so that, which are all so applicable to the profession. And they're essentially in some ways, not quite continuing education, but I had like a tag phrase for it. I can't remember. But those are some of the things that I think are really important, because ultimately at the end of the day, and especially when you're being interviewed, we all just want to be able to know that you're not all expected to be experts on genetic counseling. I'm still not even an expert on genetic counseling, right? It's so multifaceted. And what genetic counselors are doing now, there's just no way for any one person, and let alone an applicant, to really truly understand all the different components of the genetic counseling profession. What it is that we want to have a good idea of, though, is that you've done some of your research, you're thinking ahead, you're almost thinking of yourself already as a genetic counselor, even if you haven't gotten into a program yet, right? Gosh, where would you like to see yourself as a genetic counselor in 5 years, right? Approach it in that way. And I think that that you'll be in a good place if you kind of put that, if you shift your perspective a little bit that way.
And then my other question, I'm sure that you could probably find this somewhere on the website, but what are the rotations that you guys offer?
So every program is required to offer a certain, every student needs to graduate with a certain number of experiences, and we log them as core cases, and they have to be within cancer, reproductive, adult, but adult non-cancer, and pediatrics. So every student is supposed to get experience in those 4 areas. Now, we have 5 rotations, and so because it's not every rotation is going to be, oh, this is your cancer rotation, oh, this is pediatric. There are a lot of our sites and a lot of genetic counselors who are generalists, and they're doing all different specialties all the time. So but the important thing is to be all cases and to have a diversity of experience. But many of our students, actually most of our students, have an industry experience. So either doing, as a medical science liaison, working with a company, or doing variant interpretation. There are a lot of different kinds of opportunities for students in terms of industry and laboratory that we specifically really try to require of our students. But we have 5 rotations just to give a little bit of wiggle room. And if, let's say, a student, by the time they were even on their 3rd rotation, they had all their kind of core cases completed, then we have some flexibility. Maybe that student really just wants more cancer, or more doing something unique and different, like with an advocacy organization, right? So we built in some flexibility in the program. Okay. All right. Were there any other questions in the chat that I might have missed? Okay. Yeah, hopefully. Thank you, Courtney, for putting the link for the experiential. We are going to update it with some of our sites external to Southern California, like in the Bay Area, in Sacramento, because we do, even though this isn't really publicized on our website, we did, for different reasons, we had to pull it, but we'll put it up. We actually have different tracks in our programs. So we have what we are considering like a SoCal track, and then have more of a flexible track. And what that means is all of our students will be required to be, once we're back in person, in Southern California at KGI in person for their classes. But in that 2nd year for their experiential, some know that they only want to stay in Southern California. And so they'll be on our like SoCal track. And then we have some other students who are like, send me anywhere. I want to go to Hawaii for 2 months. I want to go to New Mexico. I want to go to LA, just so there's more flexibility there. Okay. And, but as you all get closer to perhaps applying to our program, we'll have, we'll have more and more information, but we do have students who already travel, and so we do offer essentially 2 different kinds of tracks. So we're not just, just a Southern California program, even though that is where the bulk of the training and the bulk of and definitely 100% of the education part.
I have a question.
Yes.
Really quick. Is for the full track the semester, is that like a full-time student or part-time student as well?
Everything is full-time.
Full-time. Okay. When you say full-time, how many classes would that be in a semester?
So in the first year of the program, it's 17 and a half credits. It's a packed first year. Second semester in the spring, it is 19 credits. And then in the second year, it is dedicated to field work. So about 24 hours a week in the second year, as well as capstone, and a full day of courses about every 3 weeks. All right, Carolina?
I was wondering, in terms of applicants that apply straight out of college, does that like render anything? Like, or do you usually prefer applicants that have like taken a time off?
There is no preference whatsoever. Some of most of our current first years are relatively straight out of undergrad, but our soon-to-be graduates are like all over the map. Our oldest second year student is like 50, and our youngest was straight out of college. So no, it really is about the perspective and the depth and what we all think that you would bring to not just our program, but to the profession. And that is genuine. And that really comes in all ages, all life experiences, right? Just because someone might be straight from undergrad doesn't mean they are without life experience, so.
For the field work, does it have to be non-paid?
All of it is non-paid. When you're a full-time student, our students cannot accept money for their internships.
I had a question. So for all of the like rotation sites that you had, like how does it work trying to like match students to rotation sites? Like how much like is there like your preference taken in, and how much of it is just more of a you're matched where you match and you go there and that's it? Like what's the balance like?
So I do my best to try to match preferences. And with that said, we do not take, I want to be at City of Hope and Kaiser, Sunset and blah, blah, right? Like that we can't do, because then we're, teetering on any kind of potential for a perception of favoritism. And that's just not, one, it doesn't happen. Some sites do have specific requirements, and not all students are privy to what those requirements are, but only some students might have those requirements, okay? But generally speaking, I have a pretty good idea of student learning styles, supervision styles, and a lot of it is where students live too. I do try to accommodate location to some degree, but it really just, if I think a student would be better working with this team, for example, right, then that's how a lot of it is made. It is very, very personalized. And then some of it is like, my gosh, if a student just needs cancer cases and this is the like only option that we have, that's where you're going. Okay. So it's kind of a mix of all, and it really is a mix of all. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thanks, Courtney.
You're welcome.
Hey.
Reach out anytime if something comes up after this session. Sorry if I'm spotty. My internet has been really bad this past hour, but I want to thank you all for attending and learning more. And thank you, Ashley, for hosting this. And
Of course.
yeah, we'll be in touch, everyone, and best of luck to you. And definitely check out that summer program. And we have various programs that might interest you as well. You could always apply or attend to multiple as long as the sessions don't conflict. So we look forward to maybe seeing your application soon and staying in touch. Have a good rest of your day, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
Reach out
you.
if you have more questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.